Hello friends, welcome back to your new community. This past Sunday, Russ took on the daunting task of working us through, or continuing us through the Olivet Discourse. And he took on a chunk of that discourse that is pretty intense. So first, thank you, Russ, for your ministry and serving our church and courageously working through your part of the discourse. He entitled the sermon Desolation Row, the Future Revisited. And it was verses 15 to 35 that Russ unpacked. And Russ began with this quote, this thought of Malcolm Muggeridge. And I'll just read it again. What is called Western civilization, meaning what you and I are living in, is an advanced state of decomposition. Wow, that's quite a bold statement. And another dark ages will soon be upon us, if indeed it has not already begun. With the media, especially television, and now media has evolved all the more to its many forms, and it's completely infiltrated our lives, our culture, our society. So with the media, especially television, and now we could say internet, governing all our lives as they indubitably do, it is easily imaginable that this might happen without our noticing. That phrase especially caught my attention. It is easily imaginable that this might happen without our noticing. By accustoming us to the gradual deterioration of our values. And so how I processed Muggeridge's thought is that basically we live in our culture, and if we're not careful to intentionally be countercultural as Christ followers, if we're not intentional to discern the culture that we're living in, we can easily be swept up by our culture's current, which is, I believe, flowing away from Christ, away from God. So I want to first offer these reflective questions for you as a group. Do you agree with Malcolm Muggeridge's thought? Think of living in Toronto specifically. Start with our city, our culture, and then perhaps you can move out, expand to our province, our nation, North America, our world. Do you agree with Malcolm Muggeridge's thought? Why or why not? How does our culture and media subtly or overtly distract us from Christ's eternal things? I think this would be one point, of Malcolm Muggeridge. That our culture and media, we need to be alert because it can distract us from the eternal things of Christ. And now really personally looking in the mirror, how has your alertness toward what even Jesus refers to as false Christs? And remember, let's just bring it down to earth in the simplest terms. False hopes, false authoritative hopes, what things or people that we look to for our hope and salvation. How has your alertness toward false Christs been of late? Does Jesus, your Christ, continue to be your, as the beautiful hymn puts it, to be your hope and stay above all? Okay? And then Russ, he worked us through the passage, and just as a complementary verse, Russ pointed us to Hebrews 1:1. I'll read it again. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers, meaning Israel, by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, Jesus the Christ, who is the prophet of all prophets, who speaks God's truest word. And Russ introed the passage this way because Jesus is himself making a prophecy. Okay? And Jesus himself references an Old Testament prophet, Daniel, and one of Daniel's prophecies. And he's referring to and even quoting directly a little bit what Daniel records. And so Jesus says here, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, meaning the temple, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now there Jesus speaking about the immediate geography of Israel. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. There is a clear indication that Jesus on one level is certainly speaking a prophecy directed specifically, explicitly at Israel, at his people. But I believe even within this past Sunday's passage, there's proof in verses 15 to 35 that Jesus' prophecy, it had two layers. It had two layers. One, just as I said, addressing Israel's imminent fate, and specifically the temple's fate, the brick and mortar temple, and another addressing his church to come, leaving you and I words as his church who has come after him, leaving us words to continue to guide us in our faith journey until he calls us home. Okay, so look for that proof. I want you to be convinced that this passage, there's definitely that double layering of message that Jesus is giving, a double layered prophecy. Related to that then, how is Israel's story generally, meaning starting back from Moses and Israel to Jesus's present day in Matthew, how is Israel's story generally, and specifically the destruction of the temple, both an encouragement and warning for you and me, the Christ follower, in 2021. There is some encouragement there. It's not obvious because obviously Israel's story is sad and the destruction of the temple is not pleasant. But nevertheless, amidst the rubble, there is some redemptive, encouraging message for you and me as Christ followers, but there certainly is a warning as well. Okay, so reflect on that and discuss that together. Try to apply that. I got a chuckle. I don't know if the people at home caught it well on Zoom. I'm not sure how the focus was, but for those at 826, it was pretty clear, and I got a good chuckle out of this little cartoon. The end is, and then all these years crossed out, because certainly there have been a string of people who have attempted to prophesy or interpret prophecy and predict when Jesus is returning. And of course, they were all wrong. And so just giving up on all that, the end is near. And actually that is partly the point that you and I should take away as contemporary Christ followers. We should not get into the unhealthy preoccupation of trying to predict a specific date, because Jesus himself says very clearly, it'll come up in this Sunday's passage, that no one knows except the Father the date, the time when he will send back his Son. So as a follow-up then, discuss how we as Christ Church, capital C Church, global, I want you to think and identify yourself not just with our local Trinity Grace Church, but think globally. Just connect yourself to Christ Church, multicultural church across the world. Discuss how we as Christ Church Global and Church Local, meaning as Trinity Grace Church, how should we worship, wait, watch, and work? And work meaning not just our vocational work at the marketplace or our profession, but just to make our life a good work unto Christ. How should we worship, wait, watch, and work for Christ until he returns? discuss that and remind each other, encourage each other to continue to stay focused and to continue to wait, as Max Lucado says it, to wait forwardly. To wait forwardly, not to wait passively, but we watch and wait, and we wait forwardly by being active in our Christian faith. I loved how Jesus ended this part of the discourse in verses 34 and 35. Truly I say to you, these are Jesus' words, be strengthened and comforted by them. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Jesus' words are certain, are dependable, are solid. And so all the more I appreciated Russ pointing us to Jesus' words recorded by John the Apostle in his gospel, John 16:33. I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I've prayed for your time together that it would be a time where you go deeper into knowing Christ's peace and to take heart because Christ has overcome the world. God bless.